Well, welcome everyone to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. We're thrilled you're tuning into us today. And we have Greg Schinkel back to talk about being a high value, high impact speaker. Welcome back to the show, Greg.
Jane, it's a pleasure. It's nice to be invited back. You know, the first time's always a fluke, and when you come back enough times, it feels special.
Oh, that's nice. And we don't have a jacket for you of any kind like they do on SNL. I'm sorry. But we do certainly appreciate you. Now, if anybody would like to check out some previous, we actually had at least one podcast that the topic was getting to $1 million, which I think people might want to go back and check out. So go to speakerlauncher.com, click on the podcast, and there is a search button there. You want Greg Schinkel. So Greg, we have been documenting your business, and I've been watching. I've had a bird's eye view of the evolution. You and I are in the same city. Yeah. We meet not as frequently post-COVID as we used to, but we meet a few times a year for breakfast, and I get to catch up. And the last time we met, I thought, okay, we need to talk about some of this stuff on the podcast because I think it's really helpful to other people. Talk about your evolution, like what's changed, say, in the last 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, and you're right, COVID kind of shook the snow globe up pretty good for everybody, I think, in this business. And we scrambled like everybody did to go on the virtual, but really actually a couple of things have been evolving for us. We've always been trying to think about, first of all, we want to be positioned from a price and value standpoint to be at the middle to upper end of the spectrum for what people might be willing to pay for leadership training. So we primarily, our business is training supervisors and manufacturing on how to be effective supervisors and team leaders. And we have some really big companies that have signed on with us. But the issue that's always gnawed at us, and it really came to light even some very recent conversations, is just this issue of what difference, even if we make them a better leader and the quality of their conversations and interactions goes up, what does it mean for the actual performance of the business? And even if I go back a year ago, we had done this really massive project for this big company where we had trained several hundred people. And then they got acquired by this other company, also in the construction materials space, but privately held. And I went to Atlanta and I pitched the senior team. And there was a question that they asked me, which has stuck with me ever since then. They basically said, how much can you tell us as to whether your training will actually improve our financial and operational performance? And I didn't really have a great question, but what I'd asked them before that is I said, you guys have so many operations, probably hundreds of locations where you have like either really tiny locations that are run by kind of 1 or 2 people, and then you've got some really large facilities that have, dozens or hundreds of employees. And I said, let me ask you this. When you think, because these are the senior operations executives and the CFO, and I said, in your opinion, is there any difference between the quality of the leader and the performance of the business, right? And they said, yes. And I said, so later when they challenged me, I said, well, I got to tell you the same thing you just told me, is you've noticed that generally the businesses that perform better have leaders who behave better or differently. And it does beg the question why we tolerate such a wide range of leadership capabilities when we know it's affecting the bottom line. But I still didn't have that linkage, but it was gnawing on me for this last year. So of course, this is all, to me, people should know, this is 31 years where I've really only made any serious money in this business for the last 10 years. And it's not just about making money, it's about adding value. So my biggest quest right now is it's all about value. Like, and I know that if you're somebody starting out in the industry and you're hustling for gigs, you think it's all about transactions. And I got to tell you, what the customers are craving is transformation. And they're craving it now more than ever, because what COVID did is it really did, I think, shake people up into realizing that they weren't going to go through the same motions that they'd always done out of habit. And they're now more susceptible to people who want to actually affect change, because I think we're all looking for deeper meaning. That's why we're also, I don't know about you, Jane, I'm more easily aggravated today than I have been at any time in my life. And I'm a pretty easygoing person. So I'm like going, why am I getting so aggravated? And it's because my tolerance for what I see as non-value added BS is at an all-time low. And by the way, including with customers. So the old Greg would have been like, oh, sure, you want to buy some training? Absolutely. Here's what it is. Yay, yay, yay. Look at us. Aren't we? Let's high five each other. Right. And it's like, now it's like, no, I don't want to just sell training. We either make a difference or we shouldn't work together. And I think what that does now, people again who listen, who are like into sales training and that sort of thing, will recognize that as being a bit of a what we would call the challenger sales approach, which is don't just be an order taker who's filling a box, because as soon as you do that, you're a commodity. Even if you think you're special, remember, to the customer, I know when people inquire with us, they're like, yeah, we're looking at training with you guys and a couple of others. And I immediately want to break that frame of reference, because just so you know, if you're just looking for training, please buy from the other guys, right? But if you're looking to make a difference, then please, let's continue this conversation. And then what clearly happens, Jane, in these discussions, especially lately, is that it immediately puts us into the category of one. Thank you, Joe Calloway. Or I think he gives you credit, you give him credit. But it's like, as soon as you challenge someone in a way that no other person they're speaking to is going to do that, but get real really quickly, I just think you have the opportunity to drive really high value and therefore high results.
And the first rule of negotiation, which at the beginning of a sales conversation, you're not exactly there yet, is to be detached from the outcome. Yeah. And with this kind of more nonchalant approach, but at the same time, because you want to effect change.
Yeah.
And I think that, and that's one of Joe's, who wrote the book, by the way, called Becoming a Category of One.
Yeah.
Joe's, one of his first pieces of information to the client was, I don't actually know if I'm
exactly.
So let's just have a conversation. Yeah. And so he immediately detaches from the outcome, like you're detaching from the outcome, and you're in a much stronger position moving forward, because if you don't get the business, you are not going to be crushed. And, I think also what you talked about in there for bureaus is something to think about too. Do you want to be an order taker and a commodity? Or do you really want to dive deeply into why your clients want this in the first place? Yeah. And I think that it's easy to.
Yeah, you raised a good point, which, in our case, we don't, because we're not at this point doing a lot of keynotes, but I might actually come back to that, Jane. The advice you gave me way back in 2004 and 5 might resurrect itself, because I might be interested in doing higher end keynotes in manufacturing conferences with senior level decision makers, whether it's at a high fee or not. But it's like, because those are my new people. I used to believe that the HR crowd was my people and they still love us. But now it's the senior operating people that I'm finding, and just to give people hope, I got to tie this back to your bureau comment eventually, but I just find that anyone who's an intermediary, so in our case, an intermediary might be an HR person. In the case of a speaker selling a keynote, it might be a bureau. So you're already sort of disconnected from the end client in a way, at first, at least, because in my case, the HR person doesn't have a budget usually. It's like they're just been sent on a shopping excursion to find someone. We call them the scouts. Now, some of those scouts actually do have buying authority, which is fine. But a lot of times the person making the decision would be somebody that we would have never even met. But I think that understand, I guess, as a speaker, and this is me not having bureaus, so I'm sticking my neck out here. The bureau's job is to make their client happy, right? But also, if a bureau doesn't have them as an exclusive, they may also be competing against other options that client has. It depends, again, whether the bureau's been given that piece of business to place or not. But then if I was a speaker, I now have to recognize that I have to add value to the bureau while they're adding value to their client. And I need to share with them that, look, we have something that I think goes beyond. Yes, the client wants a speech, and quite frankly, you're looking at across the category of all these innovation speakers, or futurists, or sales, or leadership, fill in the blank. By the way, if anyone feels extra special, just type in what you speak about and just see how many other hundreds of people come up. And then you'd realize at that point you're a commodity. So then the question is, how are you going to break through the commodity, both in the bureau's perception, but also in the bureau and how they're positioned with their customer? So if I go, look, there's tons of people that you could hire in the price band that you're looking for who could probably deliver this keynote. which is interesting just to say that. Like I say to people who are looking for leadership training, I bet if you look at enough of our websites, you'd say all the bullets look the same, because they do. We all are teaching communications, motivation, retention, talent, conflict, blah, 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 blah. So that is actually not the issue here. The issue here is who is going to surround those bullet points with the right process that actually delivers value to the customer. Just ask yourself, Mr., Mrs. Bureau representative, what if that client said, not only was it good value for the fee that we paid the keynoter, but the amount of impact that they had on the organization and their willingness to actually go deeper into what the real issues were and what the real solutions were was game changing for us. And so the fact that I want to position you as a bureau as being seen as a game-changing partner to this end customer. And now, by the way, friends, if you're going, he is spinning such a line of BS right now, I just need you to understand that you don't always have to connect exactly A to B to be seen in a different way from a perception standpoint, because most people are too afraid to even talk about it. The fact that you're willing to even understand that the client is trying to affect a change in their organization through this event at which you will be the speaker. And you're either going to be a catalyst for that change and help drive the results from it, or you're just going to be another fluff on the ocean of neat stories and insights. And so my suggestion for everybody is, even if it's a bold step forward, try to see what you will do even to try to move the agenda forward from the client's perspective, even to ask about what the agenda is, and even to even be so bold as to say that you're going to impact that in some way.
I think that's really important. Think about moving from a commodity where you are filling a slot in a conference to some sort of transformational advantage that you can offer up your client. And that is going to be, I'm wondering, Greg, this is just an idea I just thought of for you.
Yeah.
If you want to bring back the idea of the keynote as the rainmaker, and what if you took your book of business that you have right now and only looked backward and worked on the people that you already have, because you have some new offerings now that you had 2 years ago.
Yeah, for sure.
That
Or Jane, and by the way, so you're right, from a commodity, which I was called from transactions to transformation, or what we're showing on our product roadmap now to customers is from training to transformation, right? Because we can sell you training, and training is certainly where people start with us no matter what. And by the way, seldom does anyone want to step in and sign $1 million contract. So we're very open-ended. Let's start with one project with one group in one location. And then our pricing is all very variable anyway, so that they can buy as much as they want, right? So I'm never, again, just like you say, I hope that people buy from us, but I'm not desperate in any way. But then if you go back to your comment, we always sold a wide menu, and many of your audience members probably have a fairly wide menu of potential things that they could either deliver, and they probably have delivered little bits and pieces of them to different clients and different projects. But what we did recently that started to change the conversation is we did put it on a product roadmap. And so in one-page visual now we can show that, here's the things we could do to help you solve an immediate organizational issue that will, at least fix what you're trying to fix right now. But I want you to see that there's a bigger picture in the future, which is transformation. And that is, if you want an organization that people love working for, that drives results and value like never before, once we prove ourselves on this this pilot project that you have, then just know that we have this. Now, Jane, to your point, we have like hundreds of people in our database, and many of them in fact, I took over my business from my dad, who just turned 91, is writing his memoirs, by the way. And you'll remember that when you and I first worked together, it was kind of still surrounding, I'd been running the business on my own, but still stumbling around, finding my lane. But I will say this, that we've tended to be a love them and leave them type of sales organization, which is, oh, love you, sign the contract. We work with them sometimes for 3 or 4 years. And then you know what happens? The regime changes, the key decision makers move on, and suddenly the people who loved you aren't there anymore. And they've gone on to the next thing, the next leadership training company, the next person who speaks on that, or the next book that they bought at the airport bookstore. So what I've done recently is I've gone back to some of the senior executives who I've run into over the years, who I probably never even stayed in touch with. And just on LinkedIn, I'm sending them a note that says, hey, I remember we did this project with you back in 2011 and 2012. I remember when you started off as just the production manager at this one location, and now you're executive vice president over all these operations. And I said, I've got this really cool model called the Operational Priorities Accelerator, which, by the way, big thing is to name stuff, right? So we call it the OPA. And then what we're trying to do is have a conversation now. And by the way, I got to tell you, you're onto something, because whenever you try these ideas, who knows whether anyone wants to buy them or not. But when you put it out there and somebody that you haven't met with says, I want to meet you tomorrow or next Tuesday. And then and the other thing, Jane, that I think we get, like, we have to figure all this out before we have these discussions. And I said, look, this is a prototype, which was true. It's only like 2 or 3 weeks old. In fact, when I presented, I said, I don't even know what all the services are that will surround this model. I just need you to tell me whether the model itself makes sense. And they, not only are they saying yes, like I've had probably 6 or 8 high value meetings just in the last 2 weeks by being bold enough to reach out, not with that sleazy LinkedIn, hey, we just met and I want to sell you up for something, but just, I got an idea and I think it would be cool because it basically takes all those things you're trying to achieve as a senior executive and gets it traction all the way down to the front line. And I just thought you might be interested in it. And I'm telling you, they're on it and they want to meet right away. And that's the other thing to be prepared for. So some of the meetings now, they've said, the model's awesome. I want to know when you got these 9 steps that we're going to follow. And I go, great. Well, when I have them, which will be the next 4 to 6 weeks, I'll come back to you. But remember, we're going to co-create this thing together. Right? Because if you're not the kind of company that wants to create something right now, I'll wait for 18 months till we have it perfected. But just remember that you'll miss out on 18 months of operating results improvements. Now, if that's okay, now I'm sounding very salesy when I say that, but I just, if you're a tried and true, you only want to buy it when it's absolutely locked down and perfected, then I'll just make a note and talk to you in a year. Wow. But if you want to move the needle in your third quarter results, then we should probably talk sooner, right? Because otherwise you will have what every organization has, and that's organizational drift. And you're either going to jump on the success line today, or you're going to have to use heroic measures 9 months from now to close the gap between what you could have achieved and what you need to achieve now. So just ask yourself how quick you want to move forward with that.
So number one, really making sure that you're naming things like what you're offering people has value built into the name.
The name should almost say it. Like when I say Operational Priorities Accelerator, there's not much to misunderstand there, right? You have some stuff you're trying to get done and you want to move faster.
That rings a little Dan Sullivan-esque to me. And I'm like, oh, I think there's some Dan influence in there, Greg. And good.
Oh yeah, for sure.
We have a process called Ready, Aim, Launch, which has kept us on track for my entire career. Since the moment I wrote book number 1, the first version of The Wealthy Speaker, Ready, Aim, it used to be Ready, Aim, Fire. And we changed it to Ready, Aim, Launch. I got to tell you, that has kept us on track. So name everything and really be thinking about whether or not you can circle back to your clients. And I like the way you're doing it, because not only when you get their buy-in on developing something new, it feels collaborative. They have some ownership in it now, and they're going to tell other people that they participated in. Maybe you can interview them, and there's so many things that can spin off from that, which I think.
Just one quick note, Jane, that in addition, both you and I are in strategic coach, which again, I'm a slow learner. It's taken me 4 years to finally put into action a few of these ideas. So that's part of the evolution, right? Is that the few years of transformation is also being part of that program. But the other thing I wanted to mention, and people can just look it up and watch some YouTube videos. There's a guy out of Australia named Simon Bowen, Bowen, and he has a program called the Models Method. Now, I know that some people actually will have heard of it, and you can get lots of his free stuff on YouTube and things. I actually paid the money for my wife and I to sit through his course, and now I'm going to get my general manager and my curriculum designer, because I now see at the senior level, they don't want to just hear words and see bullet points. They want to see pictures of models. And so to the extent that you can create a diagram And of course, there's a whole science behind it. And he even talks about there being a choreography to it, which I love because that almost says like it's dance. And what it is you're taking people through a series of steps. And it's like you're simulating sketching something on a napkin in a bar or restaurant, which we would have done years ago. And then people say, I want to buy that.
That's so cool. And what I want to say to everybody is one of the ways that Greg does this is on his iPad with the iPad Pro with the pencil.
Yeah.
Gets his framework up on the screen, and then he starts to, like he's drawing on a napkin for them, he starts to walk them through it. And so I think it's really important. If you're watching on YouTube,
I'm going to hold it up because if you check out the video, I just want people to see what you're talking about. So first is, I'll talk about the product roadmap.
right.
And then, but I can sketch on that in real time.
I just want to tell people who are watching on the podcast, everything looks beautiful. It looks organized. It's different colors, and really take the time. Like, that's where to spend some money in your business, is on graphics, especially if these graphics are used in your selling process. You don't want to scrimp on that. You did for me something that was kind of like you were on a napkin.
Right.
And it was a little bit cruder, and I thought that was great too. So
so again, if you're seeing the video, a model might look like that to start with, which is really just an empty shell, and then you could color it and add it.
There's 3 circles that intersect. When Greg walks you through it, he's using his highlighter and coloring in backgrounds and things, not to perfection, but just enough so people can get it. And I think that that's really cool. Having a visual that you can walk people through when you're trying to affect change like this is very, very helpful.
I will say to people that it's changed a lot of things in our business to the point where I'm equipping now the team with these tools, because I see that it elevates even the impact meetings that we have at the end of a project, which again is new, where we actually meet with the customer to tell them all the good things that happened during the project and to talk about recommendations for next steps, some of which, by the way, they can do on their own without us, and some that require them to buy some more from us. And we're doing project launch meetings at the front end to clarify what the executives are going to do to support the project. And what we're seeing is that's where we've elevated our pricing as a result of that, because price has to at least keep up with value. And I got to tell people, just so that they know, if you start using even rudimentary tools like this, which you could design in PowerPoint to start with, and then you could spend some money on a graphic artist, which isn't that much money to get it to look even better. Once you put it in a visual, people then can, they absorb it faster, and they'll write on it. They'll be interested in it. I would just say that it's accelerated the sales process dramatically. And when I say dramatically, instead of it taking weeks or even months to get a deal put together, like next steps next week, next steps like as soon as I'm available. And now I've got one client where they say, I want to bring all the presidents of the operating divisions together to meet you at one time, instead of you having to meet with every one of them one-on-one, because we're hearing such buzz about this model that you've created. They all want to do it right now. And I say, well, that's a terrible problem.
I love that. Okay, so there's so many things to unpack here. If you are a mostly keynoter, which is not your situation, Greg runs a training operation, and by the way, most of the training is now done by other people, which I love. And I have a feeling that 10 years ago, you might not have been able to see the vision. Anyway, that's another story. Here's the other thing. He names the next steps call. So rather than calling it, let's have a post-mortem, or, lots of people.
It's an impact meeting because it's about impact.
Lots of people call it nothing. Let's just follow up and have a call.
A project wrap-up meeting is not very invigorating.
More enticing. Now you have kind of more of a framework. So why
don't you call it the maximizing value from your investment meeting? I mean, that would probably get them to be excited, right? So, you've made this investment. We're going to have a call at the end on how you can extract the maximum. We'll call it our ROI meeting. Call it something. Here's the other thing I'd say for us. We all tend to frame things from our own perspective. It's like I even have these tiny little things with my team, although I'm trying not to be a meddler and a perfectionist. But like when we're sending meeting requests, don't say with so-and-so client, because that shows up in their calendar with their own name. That has nothing to do with it. It's like if it's me and somebody else, it's them and Schinkel, leadership transformation discussion. Like that's what the calendar entry, that's a touch point. And even if you put it in the description, we're going to be discussing how to accelerate your operational performance through investing in the leadership training of your team. That's what we're doing in this discussion. This is value added because you know what? Neither one of us can waste any time at what we're doing.
Yeah. So is it, do I blow off the Greg and Gina meeting, or do I blow off the maximize your investment meeting? You know, you're much less likely because you can see the value right in the title of the meeting. And I love that. That is a master's level tip. And you heard it right here on the Wealthy.
Well, hey, why not even if you had a bureau or talking to somebody about a keynote? One of the things that I do in our process is I have a keynote to transformation discussion with you, which is it's one thing for me to talk to your audience for 45 minutes or 60 minutes. But one of the things that we are serious about is the ideas that are in that keynote can each be broken apart and accelerated throughout your organization, because it's not enough to get one or two takeaways from and a laugh and a tear. That's not enough value. Now, that being said, Jane, I do believe that the center of everything we do is not logic, it's emotion. So I know that pretty much everybody who's, worth listening to on stage already knows how to make emotional connections. My question to everybody is, how are you going to make emotional connections out of the logical and business concepts that are in there? And if you can start to do that, you start to move people. And it's a great question. Like if I can move the emotional state of some of your people around some of these concepts that you're trying to move forward in your transformation in your business, what kind of benefit does that bring to you from a financial standpoint? And you know what? I know it's asking a lot from my 60-minute talk, but that's how serious I am about helping your organization achieve its goals.
And the talk may be just the beginning.
Yeah.
And when you frame it that way from the get-go, you're going to be selling transformation. But I do want to say that there are times when I've talked to decision makers where they have said, what we need in this opening slot is this. Yep. And they just want a feeling.
Oh, of course.
They want to pump up the crowd and they want somebody high energy and humor and blah, blah, blah. And so just know, we're not saying that that's not needed out there.
But let's actually frame that within what we're talking about. So what the entire success of your meeting is how well it's opened and closed.
Yes.
Right? The entire success. All the other content pieces, all the executive presentations, all the other speakers you have on content are going to deliver valuable pieces of information that will get the people in your audience to change some of their thinking and ultimately their behavior. But none of that happens if we don't create this environment right off the bat. So honestly, if you look at myself with our track record versus some of the other options you have available to you, you got to ask yourself, what difference does $2,500 make if you're already spending $250,000 on this meeting? And honestly, that 1% that you're going to spend different on me, because I'm at 10,000 instead of the other person who's at 7,500. Honestly, that's pocket change. And as you know, they're spending more on the coffee than they are on that. And I just say, look, if you could invest 1% of what's already $250,000 spend for you, and that unlocks another, I don't know, $2.5 million of behavior change and results in your organization, what is that really worth? Now, people should understand I'm making all this up on the fly, and yet I sound so confident in it that who wouldn't want to at least accept the possibility that it could be true? And if no one else is going to have that discussion, who's going to win the business? Because even if I think he's full of crap, and he's just charging 10 grand for what we could buy 7, it's enough for them to go, I'll pay the 3,000 just to have the option of maybe that coming true. Right. So anyway, I'm getting carried away, Jane. I'm really fired up.
You are getting carried away and you are getting fired up. And I love it. And what I want to note is that you and I, what was the date? Can you remember, or the year that we first work together?
It was either 2004 or five, and I had just downsized the business because we had been insolvent and we had to reinvent ourselves.
So like
So
20, almost 20 years
yeah,
ago.
18 years ago. Yeah.
What I would like to note for people, your confidence, you're no longer second guessing your decisions.
Yeah.
You're figuring out what really gets results for your clients. All of that is kind of oozing through
Yeah.
on this podcast here today. And had we had an interview 20 years
Wouldn't
ago,
have been there.
it wasn't there. And I just want people to understand that these things take time.
They do. They do. By the
Yeah.
way, Jade, I'm glad you're raising it, because confidence, if you think you're confident before you've done something, all that is enthusiasm. The only way you can become confident is to try something and then prove to yourself that you've got it. And once you've got it, here's the thing. I do see a lot of people, they don't own it after they should have already accepted that they have it. Like, we talk imposter syndrome and all those other labels, but really, honestly, why don't you believe your track record, and why not go forward with a little bit of certainty? Now, I don't want people fake, and you could argue you fake it till you make it. Honestly, people can tell the difference between genuine confidence, like, we got this. This is a game changer. We're going to move it forward, versus, well, I think it might work.
And you know what's interesting here in the school, my own confidence has evolved and changed and shifted, as has Jen, who runs my school. And what we've talked about is, okay, whether or not we're feeling personally great or not, let's put all of our confidence in the process, in ready and launch, because guess what? We know it works.
Right.
A track record of doing it over and over again. And so even if your confidence is in your content, in your materials, that's going to shine through in confidence for yourself.
Well, and Jane, you know that every once in a while, there's going to be somebody that buys something from you and they just feel like, well, it wasn't as impactful as I thought it would be. And, I had a meeting like that with a client in Mexico where we had trained them in Spanish. And at some time I just had to confront him. I said, this is just not acceptable. We can't have done 6 months of monthly training sessions and you say you haven't seen anything. And it turned into a confrontation with him about, I think actually the problem is you. Now, that sounds very abrupt and rough. And so people should understand that I took a more compassionate view of it, but I startled them when I said, the problem is your people are scared of you. And that's why they're not allowing their leadership to shine. And then we turned it into, he needs to become more of a coach and less of a director, and you know what? He went from, I'm never going to buy any more training from you, even though we'd already trained 80 other people for their North American division. And he went to, I think we're definitely going to have another conversation about this. I said, yes, you've got a homework assignment. You need to stop answering all the questions of your people and do this. So I would say that even someone who takes your school, if they ultimately didn't get enough value, my guess is isn't because of the process, because the process has worked so many times and, it works 80 to 90% of the time. So if it doesn't work, it's maybe you shouldn't. I just think we have to be bold enough and do it in a friendly, direct way, but compassionate. It's just surprising to hear someone say it doesn't work, because we know it works. So, unless something was very off in the process, we've got to confront what really might be the problem here.
Yeah. And I actually have developed another process for when people are stuck, which allows us to dive deep on mindset, to dive on, is the marketing working, and also on, have you taken a lot of consistent action, which is really comes down to. So I think this is so interesting.
I know we're getting probably close to the end of our time soon. I just wanted to also point out to people, they probably were surprised when you said that I don't deliver much. I'm really honestly the substitute teacher now in our team. So when the whole team's booked doing things, I swap in and come and deliver something. But you should know that when you have these high-level conversations, they aren't even asking whether I'm going to be involved, because they're at the senior executive level. They're not involved. So you know what? My job is to keep them on track. And I say, look, we have a mutual accountability here. I'm going to lay out a series of steps that if you agree to move forward, we're going to hold you accountable to those, and you're going to hold us accountable. Together, we're going to stay on this success line to achieve your full potential. But if any of us deviate from that, we're going to call each other on it in a very no nonsense and supportive way. And so I just need to make sure that you know what you're signing up for. Because if you say you're committed to transformation, this is not something that you're going to delegate to somebody 3 layers down. You and I are going to talk about whether we're on the path or not. And if we're not, we're going to make sure that we get back on the path, because no one wants to waste hundreds of thousands of dollars on something that doesn't yield the results that you're looking for.
Okay, so I just want to note that for people who think, which I'm sure at one point in your career you did, think that, oh no, they want me, it can only be me, comes back to the confidence in your systems and your value and your processes
Right.
have in the training. So I love that how many trainers do you have on the
Right now we have 8, and we deliver in French, English, and Spanish.
That's amazing.
We do it virtually, on demand and in person. But Jane, I know that at first in this business, you have to brand it around yourself. And I went through the same iterations. So please, if you're listening going, but I was told that has to be me and all this stuff. It needs to be you, because initially you are the delivery device, but you have to start describing what you actually do beyond your identity as a human being. Because what if, not that everyone wants to build a mega business. I will tell you though, it's not as scary as you think. I think many of us think, when you get these bigger contracts, you're going to be all stressed out and working too many days. I work less days now than I ever did before, because I have a team that delivers on it, and we charge enough to pay those people to take care of things. So I don't sweat about workbooks and travel and all this other stuff. There's people for that. The value that you're bringing is your expertise, your intellectual property, your proven systems, a little bit on your delivery. But really, it's people aren't as in love with your delivery as you think that they are. What they're in love with is the value and the results that are created by your delivery. So remember that you could package that delivery and find other people who just love to speak, but they're not great at selling. And you could go on to disconnect yourself from having to do all the work yourself. But at first, you have to prove the model yourself. So I was on the road delivering training, and then I realized I don't want to deliver 180 days of training. That's absurd. And then I found other people could deliver it as well or better than me, which is also an interesting insight. Like if you see somebody else deliver your talk better than you, I'll tell you what. And if you know you're making thousands of dollars while that person's delivering it, it's a whole level of enlightenment and awakening.
Oh, that's so good. I love that. And please know, listeners,
It's a long journey.
Everybody. This isn't for everybody. And 20 years ago, Greg could not.
No way. I was stressed out, burnt out. My health was awful. I would say that I made sacrifices for my family and my marriage that were not good choices. And now, Jane, the other thing I'd say to people is people might wonder, how's this guy who's in his mid-50s? He sounds more excited about his business now. And I will tell people, I am more excited about the next 10 years in this business than the first 31 years. And the reason for that is I now see that we could really, this will sound so cliche, I think we can change the world. And I mean, like from an employer-employee standpoint. And we're working on something that's going to, so if you do take Jane's advice and connect with me on LinkedIn, you're going to see some interesting things over the next several months that if you thought this is kind of mind-blowing, this discussion, we're going to take this to a level that no one can comprehend. And I do have a vision that no one will ever have to work for a bad supervisor again in the world. Now, that's going to be a multi-generational thing. It'll be beyond my lifetime. But we are going to work steadily at making sure no one has to go, well, half my bosses were good and half were bad.
Yeah.
Right. We want to make 100% of leaders good to work for. And we're going to not stop until we achieve that mission.
I just think that is it's very noble in the cause, and I think everybody's had a crappy boss before and is probably out there applauding you.
So Jane, but to your point, so people should know when you take Jane's advice, whether it's through her school or through her one-on-ones, know that you'll start with that value proposition. What's your promise? And I just got to tell you, you don't get it right from the beginning.
Right.
And it's an evolving thing. So be okay with it, because we used to be the #1 choice for HR professionals in manufacturing for training supervisors. And we're evolving it to be the #1 choice for linking strong and effective leadership skills to best ever operating performance, right? And now you're writing bigger checks, by making a statement like that. But if you could able to cash those checks, it's just a game-changing mode, because now you're not going to be like, oh, I don't know if we want to spend $1,000 a day on this course for this person. It's like, what? Right? we're talking about millions of dollars of impact. And I can't believe that you'd even be insulted by the fact that the course costs $1,000 per person. That's too low. Guys, if you can even get close to this, I know some of you are like going, this guy's like on something. I'm not really on something, but just know that if you could even just harness a smidge of that, just think how transformative it could be to your business. We're all playing too safe, too low on the value chain. And honestly, there's just so much to do, whether you want to sell 10 of these things a year or you want to sell 1,000 of them a year. Guys, you got to just accept that there's more that you could do to deliver value.
Greg, watching your evolution has been a trip. And I am so excited for you and the confidence that you're bringing to the table, and all of the, even in the past little bit, evolving your products and what you have. Tell everybody how they should be in touch with you. And I think LinkedIn is probably the way to go, right?
If you search Greg Schinkel on LinkedIn, there's not too many of us out there. There's a guy that runs a meat market. That's not me. So it's the guy who does leadership training. Connect with me on LinkedIn. And Jane, there's two things that I think people should keep in mind. You can probably tell that we're pretty good at selling what we sell, and we have a very narrow niche in operations right now. So if you've got client projects, I'd love to partner with you on that. So I'm looking for collaborations. And the other thing is I am looking for instructors, but please, all I would ask is that if you know that this would be a reach to work for someone like me and deliver at this high level, then wait till you're ready. But when you're ready, or if you have some time on your calendar, but you know manufacturing operations, you're quite confident and quite an experienced presenter, then Jane has sent me a few other people over the years, and they've turned into rock stars with me. So I'm happy to have those conversations, but please don't be a fake it till you make it when you reach out to me. You got to be really sure that you can deliver at this level. And then I'd love to have that discussion.
Connecting is go ahead and connect.
Yeah, for sure.
To work in the training. And I do have to say, Greg is paying well. So
we pay well because we expect a lot. And I would also say, Jane, uniquedevelopment.com, which will be, I think, in the show notes. Uniquedevelopment.com is our main website. And like everybody, our website is now quickly going to become outdated, but that's okay, because it's going to be exciting in this evolution.
Super. All right. Greg Schinkel, Schinkel. Check him out on LinkedIn. Thank you again, Greg, for your time. I absolutely adored this up-to-date conversation. Circle back and see some of the, I'd be very curious to know your feedback to see if you hear any difference in Greg. I know I did. Yeah. All right, everybody, with that, we'll say, see you soon, wealthy speakers. Bye for now.